I think with the momentum we are seeing, we need more and more parties to join this collaborative environment together and reach out to us. So that's, I think the next step is adoption. So adopt the standards. If you are not using it, be curious, ask for the standards. And as an industry body, what we can do is we can facilitate these conversations, try to bring that awareness about standardization if you don't have so. But also once you have adopted and implemented, then it's about thinking of the future, what happens next.
Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, where I meet interesting maritime professionals sharing their passion for the shipping industry and their everyday job. I am your host. My name is Lena Gothberg. Hello, Shipping Podcast listeners, and welcome to episode 241. Today is the second episode proudly sponsored by the Digital Container Shipping Association, DCSA. Since its establishment in 2019, DCSA has been a trailblazer, leading the change in shaping the digital future of container shipping. It stands as the industry's unified voice, advocating for alignment and standardization, and inspiring a new era of digital transformation. It's industries like banking, telecoms, and airlines that have reaped the benefit of digital transformation. Now, it's the container shipping industry's turn. With DCSA spearheading this change, the potential for transparency, reliability, and sustainability in global trade is vast, promising a brighter future for the industry. My guest today is Kshitij Parashar, the program lead of cargo visibility at the Digital Container Shipping Association. Kshitij is a former marine engineer who went ashore and is now leading the track and trace standards to establish a tech foundation for visibility into containers' whereabouts and events along the end-to-end container journey. I hope you will enjoy our conversation.
Every conversation
matters.
Welcome to the Shipping Podcast. Could you please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, Lena. So my name is Kshitij Parashar, and I am working with DCSA, Digital Container Shipping Association, in the capacity of a program manager for the track and trace standard, which covers the domain of visibility standards, which DCSA has been developing since last 5 years.
And what is your background? What did you do before?
I'm actually coming from a maritime background. So originally from India, basically in 2007, I had this fascination with geography and stuff. So I ended up choosing maritime engineering as something to pursue. Then I did my bachelor's in maritime engineering. And then for a short stint, I did with NYK, where I was actually on board a ship. And from there, how I ended up here is an interesting twist, right? So I realized that sailing on ship is not something for me, but being part of the global trade, the global supply chain logistics is something which was very appealing to me. So in 2012, I decided to pursue my master's in the Netherlands. And since then, I've been living in the Netherlands, been working almost 10 years. Most of it has been around supply chain, procurement, logistics, then a few years with consulting. And now this is my 4th year with DCSA. Started at DCSA in 2021 and have been busy with the development of track and trace in the majority of it, followed by operational vessel schedules in the beginning and commercial schedules also in the initial part of it. And in the last 1.5 years, I'm solely responsible for the development, maintenance, and adoption and implementation of the track and trace standard of DCSA.
So do you have a different perspective now on maritime since you've been on the tech side for a while?
I think maritime industry is an interesting one, right? Because the procedures and the processes are so much embedded from the old style of working, right? So even when I was on ship in 2010 and 11, I can still recognize the problems which are happening currently because things are happening the same way. And this is one of the reasons which kind of attracted me towards working for DCSA, because the vision and the objective of digitalizing a whole industry and as big as the container shipping industry, which is contributing to the world trade and, helping economies left, right, and center, right? So that was one of the ideas which led me to DCSA. And the perspective has changed from the tech perspective. However, if you realize that within the operations, the problems which are there in 2010 are still there, I think one immediate thing which comes into my mind is now everybody talks supply chain. Everybody realizes what supply chains can mean to them, right? So since COVID, I think it has become the center of attraction for a lot of people. For good or for bad, right? It is good for people who are included in this industry, right? Because there's so much to learn. But also on the other hand, it is also about being on your toes most of the times and trying to get ahead of the curve and be ready for these disruptions. So I think that is the perspective which has come in the last 5 years. And we keep on seeing, right, something or everything which happens with supply chain keeps on going back and forth with, okay, there's a downturn, there's an upturn, there's a downturn, there is a disruption, there's something happening in the US, there is a new regulation coming up, and there is an enhanced view on sustainability, emissions. So, every day is a new challenge, given what is happening in the world right now. So I think that perspective has even gone stronger because, the impact our work can have on these kind of things.
So what do you do when you are working with track and trace at DCSA?
As a concept of track and trace, right? As the name suggests, you are developing something which will be helping the customers to be able to track and trace the containers. So that's the basic guideline or, scenario.
So it sounds very easy.
It's
simple.
It sounds simple, right? But, we tend to say, or I tend to say, things which sound simple are often the ones where you have to put in the most effort, because each and everyone can see where the value sits and what are the benefits and where are the gaps, right? So you have to be very specific in how you define it, because it can be used by each and everyone and anyone can interpret it. So that's the not so easy part, right? Because you have to make the standard according not only to, let's say, the container carrier lines, but also keeping in mind the whole wider ecosystem. And that's why track and trace is challenging, because it touches on each and every member of the whole ecosystem. So you talk about track and trace as a service which the container shipping members, container shipping carriers are providing to their customers as a basic service. However, we have to realize that when an end-to-end customer request is made for shipping a container from a place X to place Y, there are multiple parties involved, and every one of them needs access to the information in the right amount of time, with the right quality, and with the right data in it. Up until now, the problem was that everyone was working in a siloed manner. Everyone was having their own way of defining things. Everyone was having their own way of sending this information. So what track and trace from a DCSA has brought towards the industry in the last 5 years is we have provided a common way or common data definition to exchange the track and trace information. And I'm now going into a more tech-oriented way of things. So when you talk about track and trace, imagine there are two systems which are interact with each other. And these IT systems are a complex system because they consume data from multiple sources, and they need to be understanding and interpreting data so that, within their systems, they are able to process it as soon as possible. So if we are talking about a one-to-one connection, it's already difficult, but then imagine it to be of 1,000 and million interfaces, right? And to define these interfaces between the two parties and how the data which we define in our standard is able to enable smooth data flowing from one point to the other point, but also between different parties, is what is the baseline of our standard. We want to enable interoperability, and we want to make sure that the data definitions which we use are solving business concerns, but are also giving each and every member in the whole supply chain a clear understanding and a clear view of what data to expect. And then it's always about three things, as I said. It's about people, it's about process and technology. So we enable the technology component by our data standards, which then can be employed in the processes. But at the end of the day, it's always about the people who are using these systems to be able to extract the right amount of information and to make it actionable, right? So if somebody is asking whether using a track and trace standard of DCSA will solve my issues if a container gets stuck in the Suez Canal, no, that is not the intention. However, if you have the correct data in place and you have the correct information at your hand, as and when something happens, you are better prepared to deal with disruptions. And that is the core idea where track and trace sits, is to have the information in the right manner with the predictability for each and every member in the supply chain, and to have that data available in the easiest manner possible without overcomplicating the design or overcomplicating the integrations and so on and so forth. So that's the basic idea which we developed the track and trace standard with. And keeping in mind that this is not something new. Track and trace has been there, right? So, I mean, even if you order a parcel from anywhere, a DHL or a DPD, right, you are able to get some sort of a notification on your phone, on the app. You can see, this has left this has left this. As easy as it sounds, it was not the case, which was a homogeneous way of looking at information on the container shipping side, just because of the problems I mentioned before it. Fragmented data architectures and sort of a own tunnel vision of operating, like, this is my business, this is how I operate, I don't care how the data comes in, I will make sure that I process the data and then I will make sure that it is of use to me. So that sort of boundaries have to be broken. And one of the important components in that whole picture is also the use of EDI in the industry. And probably as a supply chain person yourself and being in the industry, you know how much widespread EDI is, right? It's one of the standards which container shipping uses for almost, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 50 years or so. I may be wrong, but I'm too young to understand how old EDI is. So talking about that, right? So EDI is a standard which the container shipping uses and also some of the other industries, right? However, there was this whole problem where EDI was not easily readable, or people were interpreting EDI through different ways of communication. It was not standard. So you can send an EDI in a message, which was in track and trace, it is the IFTSTA message. You can send it over an email, you can send it over a paper, you can send it, and it's up to the other person to figure it out. And then comes along with the fact that EDI technology is not meant to be a plug and play, right? So you need to spend considerable amount of effort in order to integrate with your partners. And then the next part. So I mentioned the technology, I mentioned the process. Now comes the people part. Because EDI is so old, it's also getting difficult in, let's say, in the current market to find people who know EDI, right? So if you have to maintain your current EDI channels, you also have to hire people, train them, and expect them to be up and running, because this is business as usual. This is not something, you can learn in 6 months and then be like, okay, you need 6 months of training time, and after 6 months, you can start doing your work. So, that whole effort, which was going into EDI, and it's getting even more difficult to find the experts of EDI in the current job market. all those things combined, APIs also have been there for quite some time now. But the way we see APIs is that if we define the data structures, if we allow the members to adopt the APIs, it sets up a precedent for a lot of things which they can build on their own, right? So if they want to set up things which have to deal with real-time visibility or, setting up cloud architecture, it is easier to do it via APIs than with EDIs. So that's sort of one of the cases. It's not only applicable to track and trace, so to say, but also to almost every of the DCSA standard. So it's kind of enabling that technology transformation and also enabling a whole digital shift, so to say.
So which part is the hardest, the people, the processes, or the tech?
I would say it lies somewhere in between process and people, which is the most difficult.
Okay. Why?
I think the best way to put it is resistance to change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a common thing happening across all the businesses, across every industry. There is this whole movement around digital transformation, and I'm not going to talk about AIs or machine learning or stuff, right? I mean, there's so much happening, but then the core business is still about people and about having the right processes in place to set yourself for success, right? Mm. And you can use technology to enable it, but if the people are not aware of it, if they are not following the right processes, you are still ending up fixing and doing patchwork and correcting errors. And I think that is something which is waste in the whole, let's say, if you talk about efficiency, it's a waste, right? So imagine receiving a data in an Excel. It might sound a little bit like, we're talking all fancy concepts and stuff, but, people are still sending Excels. And then, one person is sitting behind the Excels running their analysis and, something goes wrong. And then it's hard to do this mapping again and again. And the time it takes to get to the right result, hoping that it's the right result, it's simply too much. And given the current condition in which the supply chains are already stretched, there is literally no time to waste. And, if you spend too much time on the ports, that's also not very efficient. It's also about how much are you spending on the port stays, how much time you spent on the waiting time for the trucker to come and pick up the container, and all these things are just leakages in the whole system. So in order to develop a whole efficient system where, it goes smooth from one place to the other without any problem with documentation, without any, I have missed this container getting out of the port because the papers have not arrived. But yes, if there is an API which is integrated with the systems, you are able to receive that data and then you don't have to wait for the actual paper. I mean, this became a big problem during COVID. Everything was shut down, right? And people realized it. But also on the other side, if you see a container as a physical equipment, it has a digital signature also now, right? Because you have a number, you have who's the owner and all these kind of things. So, if you think about it, things are there, but you need to interpret it in a way where the information exchange becomes easier. And that's where, when we talk about DCSA's mission, I think we are doing that. And specifically speaking about track and trace is which I think from the work we have done in DCSA with the last 5 years, and specifically on track and trace, we have seen the market embracing the standard. We have seen people adopting the standard, right? And if it's something to be proud of, almost all of our members are using the standard and providing information in that standard, which means that all of their customers, at least the majority of their customers who have the capability to consume APIs and are willing to, invest in these technologies, are also able to receive that data in the same format. So the footprint is something which we cannot even think of because, it depends a lot on the digital maturity of the provider and the consumer. But I think sky's the limit in that sense because, the more and more people will come on the API infrastructure, the more easier it will become for them to get onboarded onto the standards which DCSA is developing. And I think track and trace is just the start of it.
You answered all my questions without me putting them. That was very good.
Well, this is where I say, 5 years of working at DCSA plus the industry background just comes into being, right? So I think now I can challenge you on what other questions you can have.
So do you now see your members using these APIs in a different manner than what was initially decided to do? I mean, do they do other stuff now? Since you have sort of done the little package of API for them, can they now use it for other purposes, I think?
Of course. I think, like I mentioned, right? So by developing the APIs, and I can only talk about track and trace, and then I'll come to some other features which we included in last year, right? So as an example, last year we also thought, okay, having details about reefer containers and having details about IoT devices is also important because we saw a shift happening in the industry where, for example, one of our members decided to retrofit all their dry containers with smart IoT devices. So there was a commitment and investment happening from one of the members, which led us to believe that this is also something where, we in the future, we can see a lot of developments happening. So we released this standard back in March 2023. And now, I think a few weeks or a month ago, they released officially one of the products, which kind of deals with how the live position is shared and, how you're able to track your container all the way along its journey, right? And a few other members are also investing as we speak on having these devices fitted on their dry container fleet. So you see, that's what I'm saying, right? Somebody had to roll the ball, so we were the first ones to start. And if I say we, it is collectively speaking as the members and the subject matter experts we are working with and the DCSA as a whole, right? To have that ball rolling towards digitalization. And I think the industry itself is built in such a way that once something is out there, people want to improve the way things happen. So any development which is happening is now taken by us in DCSA to make standards on that, right? But also to improve upon it. What is the status quo right now? Okay, so, we need to have a real-time visibility on IoT devices. And then, somebody needs to provide that information. Why? Because with all the disruptions happening, there's a chaos in the market and people want to know. And we need to enable that layer of standardization to make sure that each and every member is able to pick it up and provide that in their own product and services, which kind of makes the customer much more happier, if I can say, right? But it's also touching upon the customer experience part, but also the innovation part, right? So I would say that the collective effort of all the members at their SMEs, along with us at DCSA, drives innovation also. And this is where the power of our standard comes in, right? Because you need to challenge the status quo. So, okay, EDI is old. We need to come up with APIs. Now APIs are there. What else we can develop? And, the core set of structure or infrastructure, the core set of infrastructure, the platforms and their interplay, and to be able to set up their systems according to a specific data requirement and all these things is something which we can see now. And there is an investment happening. Some of the members, obviously, there's a large difference between digital maturities as well, right? But we see every member now has embraced this way of working. And from there on, it just keeps on getting improved. So I think that's the biggest improvement which we are seeing. And the way the APIs are getting embraced. And I can say on track and trace because, I think there's a common saying within the whole community, right? With track and trace, we are seeing a lot of things happening, and track and trace is like quite far in terms of the industry adoption and people using it. And that also means that we have a challenge on ourselves because we need to listen to the market. What the market tells us and the gaps which the market tells us to improve upon, right? And that is also happening. And that also challenges us a lot in terms of how to make this better. So it's an incremental thing. So when we talk about change and in such a big industry, it's also incremental. So we have to see it as an incremental step-by-step process. And I think we are getting there. And I don't know what the endpoint will be, right? Because the whole technology landscape keeps on evolving and things keep on happening. But I think the other standards are also following that sort of trend. And yeah, it can only get better from here.
Do you see the possibility of using the way you have got your members embraced in other part of the maritime industry? I'm thinking about other transport more than containers. I'm thinking about maybe dry cargo and tankers or whatever.
On that, right? So it's an example from BIMCO, and I'm not the expertise on the part of it, right? But last year in February 2023, we released this FIT Alliance and that eBL declaration, right? And there, BIMCO is also part of that joint announcement and the FIT Alliance, and they are representing the other side of shipping, right? So based on our efforts around eBL of lading, and they are also part of it, right? So you already see like the interested parties are coming together to sort of push it through. And also when we talk about the other modes of transport, so I mean, I'm talking track and trace where it's mostly multimodal, right? So you talk about truckers, you talk about freight forwarders, the other side of the industry, which is also pretty big and pretty fragmented. They are also using the standard in the way they can. Then you talk about terminals. Terminals are also an important player in this whole picture because they are the receivers of all the containers, and they are also being looked upon as one of the players which can greatly enhance the efficiency in terms of container handling. So we are in touch with the terminals also to not only use the standard, but also give us feedback in order to improve upon things and identify gaps in the current system to further develop more things. So yeah, I think that's an important feature. And I think you already talked to Chris last week, right? So he can tell you all about the banking side of things, but you must have heard from him as well that, how our efforts are also being looked upon by the banking industry, so to say, right? And I'm not involved in that, but I'm more involved in the players I mentioned. And then there's this another community which is growing a lot is the logistic tech service providers, right? So you talk about visibility solutions, you talk about container management platforms, and so personally, I've met quite a few of them. And when I talk to them, right, one of the common factors or the common feedback which I get from them is your APIs make our life easier. And we cannot thank you enough for having this out there, because now we can focus on getting improvement in our product. Earlier, we were focused on getting things done the right way. Now you have shown us the right way. So it enables us to be more innovative. And this is a common statement when I hear it from places where I go to attend conferences and meet people, right? And I think this is through this podcast also, for me, it's an important thing to spread, right? That if you don't know about the standards, please reach out to us. But also on the other hand, if you do know the standard, also reach out to us, because we want to hear from you, so it's a collaborative effort. So sometimes what is seen for an open source standard like DCSA standards is that it's open source, everybody can use it, and I'll use it, I'll just pick it up off the shelf and I'll do it my way, and then life keeps on going. But we are sitting here to also improve on things. So that's what I would say that is call for action, right? So whoever listens to this, if you're using the standard, reach out to us. If you're not, please start using and reach out to us.
But I'm amazed. I think you are a trailblazer, the DCSA, for the rest of the industry. And that is why I'm so happy to support that you're doing this, because containers, if the big ones are doing this, I think that could have an impact on the smaller ones and people in other segments of our industry.
Yes, and this is where I think the power of our mission lies, right? That we have the support from all the industry container carriers, right? So now recently BIL also decided to get on board, right? So now we are 10 members strong, and then together we are representing a big significant portion of the global containerized trade, right? So that's where the power of, let's say, influencing things and, taking a paradigm shift in terms of digitalization lies. And I think if the momentum which we are seeing is kept, provided that the whole ecosystem is also responding in the same way as we expect them to, then I think the journey can get even more faster, right? So yes, it starts with adoption, and yes, it starts with the implementation on our member side. But I can say from a track and trace perspective, once that happens, which is the case, the other industry players also need to pitch in and need to come together and work on this collectively, because in the end, digitalization and increasing efficiencies for everyone. It's not just limited to one specific sector or one specific industry player, but it's for everyone, right? So,
and also one step towards sustainability for the entire industry.
Of course, like I've been mentioning in my previous talk, right? So efficiency in terms of container handling, in terms of reduction of paper, in terms of even as a small fact as how much time a truck spends waiting and how much time a truck is rerouted, and all these kind of small things, if you put them collectively and if you think it from a global container volume perspective, it's a big amount. And, the efficiencies can really have an effect on the bottom line of sustainability, which is obviously one of the key areas if we have to look at digitalization. It is an enabler towards a better sustainable supply chain.
Yeah. What is the next step for track and trace on DCSA? Where are you heading? I mean, what do you see on the horizon?
It's interesting you mentioned this, right? Because one of the things which I called upon was the smart containers and IoT devices and stuff. So I think in the last 1 year, we are seeing a lot of developments happening around this space. And obviously, coming from that, there is also a demand to have eventually the data and eventually the standards, and eventually somebody will be calling out for having a better data management and having standardized workflows and everything. So that's obviously the first part of it, right, on track and trace. As far as DCSA is concerned, I think the call is towards the industry players to start using the standards. And also, if you are using the standards, then also be a key player in telling us and giving us the feedback, because this is not just ending now or ending in few years. It's something which takes years. And I think with the momentum we are seeing, we need more and more parties to join this collaborative environment together and reach out to us. So that's, I think the next step is adoption. So adopt the standards. If you are not using it, be curious, ask for the standards. And as an industry body, what we can do is we can facilitate these conversations, try to bring that awareness about standardization if you don't have so. But also, once you have adopted and implemented, then it's about thinking of the future, what happens next. So collectively, if I'm talking directly to a shipper or a BCO, yes, you need to get involved, and you need to get involved more in asking for these standards, but also to the other prominent players in the industry. It's about involvement. It's about having to use the standards and driving this together.
Mm.
It's so much embedded right now because, whenever I meet people, the questions are the same. And, there's a clear ambition to do this and a clear ambition to engage in digitalization. But then the awareness is not equal across the ecosystem. And I think this is, by means of podcasts like yours, it can be a source of spreading that awareness. And it's about, supply chain is what? It's a chain, right? So you have different players, and each and every player needs to be on the same page. So we are trying to enable that on the technology part, the process part, and the people then need to jump in and do their work. So
Yeah.
I think that's where also the challenge and also the motivation lies for me, because if you're changing the whole industry, in most of the roles you get to work for a company, you get to work for an organization, you try to bring forward the change in that specific organization. Here it's about an industry with competing natures, competitive environment, different players with different skill sets, different capabilities, different scenarios which impact their businesses. So that's why it's an interesting challenge, and I think that's what keeps me going for this.
Yeah, it's never been done before because of all these reasons that you just gave me.
Which is also the reason the job can be an interesting challenge almost every day, and that's why when I'm talking to you, it feels like I answer all your questions because I can say I have been there before.
No, but if you talk to people outside the maritime industry, people knows what an API is, and people knows how it works and so on. So I'm happy that we finally might be catching up with the industries on land, more or less.
Yes. And then you talk about banking and everything, right? So if you explain somebody, then somebody from banking would be like, isn't this obvious? And why is it not happening? But that's the challenge, right? The obvious is not so obvious.
It's more than two people trying to solve a problem. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Every conversation
matters.
Congratulations on staying within the maritime industry and with your knowledge, developing it. You also mentioned the electronic bill of lading and the FIT Alliance, FIT. I will put a link in the show notes so more people can sign up and support it. Also, the contact details to you will be in the show notes since you want to hear more about your users' experiences. That's all for now. Thank you for listening. There are more conversations in pipeline, so you stay put. Until the next time, from me to you, over and out. Thank you for listening to the Shipping Podcast. Don't forget to tell everyone that you meet that there is a shipping podcast available and that they should download it and listen to the maritime professionals who are sharing their passion for the shipping industry.